I received a call on my smartphone saying that my daughter had collapsed. I hurriedly caught a taxi and headed to the hospital, but my daughter had already passed away. Why? Tears overflowed, and a deeper sense of regret than sadness welled up.
The doctor said it was a heart attack.
My son-in-law Colton said in a calm tone. The 3 granddaughters who had come with him were crying loudly. It was no wonder they were crying and grieving over the sudden event. They were still in their sensitive teenage years. I couldn't help but hold the 3 of them tightly. Then, my daughter's funeral was held. Her boss and colleagues from work came to mourn her untimely death. However, that night, Colton said something shocking.
I'm going to remarry the president's daughter. The kids are a nuisance. You take care of them, old woman.
Unbelievably, he boldly declared that he was abandoning his family. And true to his word, he disappeared after the funeral. When I tried to contact him, the phone wouldn't connect. What was he planning to do with the grandchildren left behind? I decided to stay at my grandchildren's house to take care of them. One day, when I returned from shopping, I heard cheers coming from the living room. The grandchildren were laughing at something. Then, they quickly took a piece of paper that had just come out of the printer and handed it to me.
With this, Dad is going to hell,
said Lydia, the youngest daughter, with a smile as I approached. I am Ariana. Having finished raising my children as a single mother, I am now living alone. When I was still young, in my 30s, I lost my husband and lived with my daughter Natalie. Her rebellious phases during middle and high school are now nostalgic memories. I know I caused Natalie a lot of trouble by being a single parent, but I also tried to give her as much love as I could. As soon as she entered university, she confessed something to me.
Mom, you went through a lot of trouble to raise me. So, I want to repay you by being a good daughter from now on.
I remember my eyes welling up with tears at those unexpected words. Eventually, Natalie graduated from university and got a job at a prestigious company. She was a patient child, so she rarely complained about her work. Sometimes, I felt a bit lonely, wishing she would rely on me a little more. After she started working, she would surprise me with trips for my birthday or Mother's Day every year. Thank you, Natalie. I am so fortunate.
Me too, Mom,
Natalie replied, and we both smiled shyly at the hotel during one of our trips. Natalie finally found a partner and said she wanted to get married. He was a senior at the same company, named Colton. His firm mouth, expensive-looking suit, and gentlemanly demeanor were overwhelming. Later, Natalie told me that he had been popular among the female employees since he was a new hire. Handsome, elite, tall, and well-dressed, it was no wonder. I wondered what made him choose Natalie.
Why did I choose Natalie? Well, she is very serious about her work. And she is also very filial, which I found very admirable. I was drawn to such a wonderful person,
Colton said, blushing as they exchanged glances. They looked so fresh and well-matched at that moment. The two got married and, a few years later, had 3 children. Natalie and Colton continued to work at the same company, with Colton now in the HR department. His popularity did not wane, and despite having a wife and children, female employees continued to approach him. Natalie began to express her unease about Colton's friendly nature.
He gets lunch boxes from various women. He says he refuses them, though.
It's okay, Colton seemed sincere.
I hope so, but some people enjoy stealing others' partners.
I've never seen that. Is it true?
Yes.
Natalie nodded vigorously while munching on a snack. Since giving birth, I felt that Natalie had become stronger in many ways. As a wife and mother, she was updating her inner self. However, whenever she was troubled, I always tried to be there for her. As for the grandchildren, the eldest, Elena, and the twins, Lillian and Lydia, were all girls and very close. The three sisters grew up quickly, with Elena now in her 9th grade and Lillian and Lydia in the 5th grade. Despite the age difference, they all shared a love for mystery novels. Last Christmas, they asked for the complete works of Conan Doyle as a present. I wondered if it was something for elementary and junior high school students to read. But they all laughed and said, "We're mystery geeks." Their room is filled with mystery novels. I always see my grandchildren during the summer holidays when the three of them come to stay with me, and they are very attached to me.
Grandma, let's go to the movies,
said Elena.
They're showing Agatha Christie,
said Lillian.
I want popcorn too,
added Lydia. Even though it's only for a few days, seeing their beaming smiles makes me want to do anything for them. All right, let's go then, I said. Natalie had told me not to spoil them too much, but that was difficult. One summer day, during a heat wave, I received a call on my smartphone saying that Natalie had collapsed. What? Colton, is that true? My hands trembled, and my heart felt like it was being crushed. Colton, however, calmly informed me of the hospital where Natalie was, as if it were a routine matter. I hurriedly caught a taxi and headed to the hospital where Natalie and Colton were. By the time I arrived, Natalie had already passed away. Tears overflowed, and a deeper sense of regret than sadness welled up. Why? I called Natalie's name over and over. I wanted her to respond. But her tightly closed eyelids never opened again.
The doctor said it was a heart attack,
Colton said. The granddaughters who had come with him were crying loudly. It was no wonder they were crying and grieving over the sudden event. They were still in their sensitive teenage years. It was natural for them to feel insecure. I couldn't help but hold the three of them tightly. It's okay to cry, all of you. Let's say a proper goodbye to your mom. While hugging my granddaughters tightly in the hospital corridor, I looked at Colton.
Why, Natalie, why?
He turned his back to us, probably trying not to show his tears. It seemed he was crying alone. He wiped his eyes with the cuff of his expensive suit. But for some reason, the cuff didn't seem wet. Sniffling, he turned to face us. Strangely, his eyes looked as if he hadn't been crying at all, and there were no traces of tears on his cheeks.
I'm sorry for losing my composure. I need to go back to the office and report this,
he said calmly. What? Can't you do that over the phone? What about the kids?
Ariana, please take the children home with you. I'm sorry, but please,
he said and left. His calmness was eerie. Or maybe he was just pretending that nothing was wrong. After that, he left all the paperwork and administrative procedures to me, always giving some excuse like an important business meeting or an unavoidable client dinner. At the funeral, he was constantly looking at his smartphone, fidgeting.
Oh, It's from a client. It seems one of our subordinates caused some trouble, and I need to handle it.
Colton said.
But there are many people from your company here too.
I replied. Many people from Natalie and Colton's workplace, including their superiors and subordinates, attended the funeral. There were bosses shedding tears over Natalie's untimely death, female colleagues who had lunch with her, and junior employees. Everyone shared their memories of Natalie, saying she was a caring person. Her work was also outstanding, and she had come up with ideas that no one else could imitate, leading to successful projects. I had never heard Natalie talk about her work. Learning about this side of her now filled me with a sense of inadequacy.
You are the chief mourner, so please give a proper greeting,
I admonished him. Colton sighed in annoyance and muttered.
I understand.
At that moment, a woman approached Colton.
Colton, my condolences.
She said, but changed her tone when she saw me. I was suspicious, but Colton didn't seem to mind and welcomed her happily.
Delilah, you came. Despite being busy. Oh, Ariana, this is Delilah.
Colton suddenly became talkative and even revealed that she was the president's daughter. Watching the two of them, I noticed they seemed unusually close. It didn't seem like they were old acquaintances or childhood friends. Despite being at a funeral, Delilah clung to Colton and wouldn't let go, as if to say, his side is my place. My intuition, which I didn't want to rely on, told me something was wrong. That night, after the grandchildren had gone to bed, I confronted Colton about her.
Her? Oh, Delilah. Well, she's like my girlfriend,
he said irritably. I couldn't believe my ears. Girlfriend.
After getting married, I realized. Natalie is plain, not interesting, and not glamorous,
He said. I stared at him, wondering what he was talking about.
Even though we have money, she kept saving for the kids.
He spat out in disgust.
I was fed up with the poor lifestyle.
Savings are necessary. You need money for the 3 kids' education.
Natalie told me that too. That's why I said I wanted a divorce. Many times.
Many times.
But Natalie refused, saying it wouldn't be good for the kids. At least until they become adults,
He said. For Natalie, who was raised by a single parent, she probably didn't want her daughters to go through the same experience.
She always prioritized the kids and put me last. It's really annoying how serious she is,
Colton said. I struggled to understand. Are there families that don't prioritize their children? Despite being an adult, he seemed to only think about himself. Colton, looking irritated, glanced at his smartphone and continued.
So, I started seeing Delilah to blow off steam, and I strongly felt that it would be better if Natalie wasn't around.
I was speechless, unable to say anything, while he calmly said,
Well, it's just as well. I'm going to remarry the president's daughter. The kids are a nuisance. You take care of them, old woman.
He declared boldly, abandoning his family. Before I could say anything, he quickly disappeared. Although he attended the funeral as the chief mourner, he left the house as soon as it was over, causing the grandchildren to panic. When I tried to contact him, he didn't answer the phone. It seems he even took paid leave from work and hasn't been going to the office. Natalie never consulted me about the divorce. It was a matter between the couple, so it wasn't my place to intervene, but I still feel regret, thinking I might have been able to offer some advice. No, now is not the time to be sentimental, I said, slapping my cheeks with both hands and packing for a few days. I headed to the house where the grandchildren were and decided to stay there for a while. When they saw my face, they were relieved and started crying, causing a commotion. They must have been very anxious with their father gone too. It's okay now, I'm here, I said, hugging the three of them tightly to calm them down before preparing dinner and doing the laundry. When I glanced at the calendar, I saw a date circled in red pen with the words "Summer Vacation Starts" written on it. It seems like it will start next week.
Grandma, you came to our house this year,
Lillian said, hugging my waist tightly. Her eyes were red from crying earlier. With an innocent expression, Lillian stared at me for a moment before pattering out of the living room. Elena and Lydia didn't say anything, but they seemed to be trying to cope with this reality. While spending time with them, I started sorting through Natalie's belongings. As I picked up each item, memories of Natalie flooded back. Why did my daughter, whom I raised with so much effort, have to leave so soon? God is unfair. Thinking of such thoughts, I picked up a diary. It had a combination lock, clearly different from the other items. Come to think of it, she mentioned something a few months ago, I recalled. Natalie had said,
If anything happens to me, please look at the diary with the lock.
She had also told me the combination, saying she would only share it with me. It was the sum of the birthdays of Natalie, Colton, Elena, Lillian, Lydia, and mine. The dial had 4 digits, with the left 2 digits being the month and the right 2 digits being the day. 2788. It's open. What could be written inside? A will, perhaps? Although I didn't really want to look, my curiosity got the better of me, and I slowly turned the pages.
If you are reading this diary, it means I have already left this world.
It began. I was startled by such words. Too much reading of novels. I composed myself and continued reading, only to find something unbelievable written inside.
No way! This can't be true!
The diary detailed the suspicions of Colton's infidelity and the process of gathering evidence. It also touched on the working conditions at her company. There were records showing unreported overtime and instances where she was denied permission to go to the hospital despite complaining of poor health. She had hidden the recording data of those times in another place. I found the recording data and decided to listen to it immediately. It contained a harsh voice berating Natalie when she asked to go to the hospital. I couldn't understand why she was treated so harshly. It seemed that Colton had ordered her transfer to this strict boss.
Colton betrayed me and the children. He will pay for this,
the diary concluded. Natalie had been preparing to demand compensation from Colton and his mistress with this evidence and to proceed with the divorce. I was surprised at how shrewd my daughter was. However, even though I found this, Natalie was no longer here. I threw away the diary and the recording data, thinking they were useless. The 3 sisters bravely continued going to school. I hoped they wouldn't overexert themselves. While doing everything I could, I watched over the 3 of them. A week passed, and the grandchildren started their summer vacation. In the garden, 2 potted sunflowers stood tall, almost ready to bloom. After the summer vacation began, they started spending a lot of time in Colton's room. For the grandchildren, he was still their father, and they couldn't let go of that recognition. Knowing what he had done, it pained me. Even while sorting through Natalie's belongings, I brought snacks to the grandchildren.
I brought orange juice for all of you,
I said. They were looking at the books and scrapbooks Colton had left behind, as if searching for treasures. Sometimes, they would use the family computer or tablet, trying this and that. I thought it might be for a summer vacation project and didn't pry too much. One day, when I returned from shopping, I heard cheers coming from the living room. The grandchildren were laughing at something.
Oh my, what's going on, you three? You seem to be having fun,
I said as I approached. Lydia noticed me and smiled. She quickly took a piece of paper that had just come out of the printer and handed it to me.
With this, Dad is going to hell,
Lydia said. Puzzled, I looked at the paper she handed me. It was a printout of an anonymous message board titled, "Gather here if you want your wife to die." What? What is this? I could tell it was an anonymous message board, but I didn't understand what it meant. Seeing my confusion, Elena explained.
Grandma, see this red name? This person's name is Colton.
Colton?
Yes. Comments posted from this internet connection are displayed in red. So, this is Dad's comment.
Indeed, Colton's comment was displayed in red. As I continued reading, it detailed how he had cornered Natalie.
I abused my authority in the HR department to transfer my wife to a troublesome department. That place is always short-staffed, serving her right. Because she is so caring, she stays late every day to help her subordinates with their overtime, working over 80 hours a month. She'll collapse from overwork soon.
what a terrible thing.
I was shocked, but the comments continued.
Pretending to care for my tired wife, I cooked unhealthy meals full of oil and salt. It was amusing to see her eat them every day. She told me her health check results weren't good, but I won't let her go to the hospital or get a re-examination.
Such malicious words were written in red. In response to Colton's posts, others replied with comments like "You're a monster" or "Keep it up," egging him on. It's hard to believe someone could methodically drive another person to such a state. I couldn't hide my shock that Colton, who seemed so personable, had done all this. The final post read,
Finally, my wife is gone. She was taken to the hospital with a heart attack, and I met her mother there, pretending to be sad. Now I can get rid of her.
How awful.
He reported Natalie's death with joy. It was so grotesque and hard to believe. Other comments congratulated him, expressed envy, or offered words of encouragement. I never imagined such a vile world existed, and I was stunned. Colton was as cunning and wicked as a snake. How could such a thing be allowed? Anger began to well up inside me. However, I was surprised that the three girls had noticed Colton's behavior.
It's elementary, Watson,
Lillian said, imitating Sherlock Holmes.
Mom was always busy, but Dad seemed to have plenty of free time, which was strange.
She continued.
And
Lydia added.
when we argued with Dad, he said something.
What did he say?
He said, "Don't rely on Mom. She could be gone any day."
Arguing with him suggested that Colton and the grandchildren didn't get along well. They must have been suspicious of his actions for some time. Since then, the three of them had been watching Colton closely. Colton frequently used the computer, looking up recipes and videos for dishes he normally wouldn't be interested in. The tablet's search history included terms like unhealthy food and salt content. They also knew about the mysterious woman in the photos on the tablet. They had seen him slightly smiling right after Natalie died and at the funeral. The final piece of evidence was his scrapbook.
Articles about people collapsing from overwork were collected in it. Some were diagnosed with heart attacks.
Elena said.
So, the three of us thought Dad was the culprit.
Lillian added.
We've been looking for evidence since the summer vacation started.
Lydia said. It seems the mystery-loving three sisters had sharper observational skills than Colton or I had imagined. But how did you manage to find this message board? I asked. Lillian proudly snorted.
Besides the tablet's search history, we read books and restored the deleted history. Watson.
Lydia said. Even though she's only in 5th grade, she managed to do that. If not, we wouldn't have this printout in our hands. How lonely and anxious the young teenage grandchildren must have felt after losing their mother. I remembered their faces, relieved and crying, when they came to this house. Even so, they were trying their best to fight in their own way, and I couldn't overlook that. My eyes welled up with tears.
Grandma?
What's wrong?
Elena asked. I couldn't let the efforts of these little detectives go to waste. I bit my lip, looked at the three of them, and thought of Natalie. He must face the consequences. I vowed that Colton would not escape and would fulfill his parental responsibilities. Thank you, all three of you. Leave the rest to Grandma, I said. Later, I visited a lawyer I knew. I consulted him about whether we could claim compensation based on the evidence the grandchildren had found and their testimonies. He looked closely at the printouts from the message board and the search history evidence, but his face clouded, saying it might not be enough. Then, can we use this as evidence? I asked, showing him the diary and the recording data found among Natalie's belongings.
I'll take a look,
he said, flipping through the diary and listening to the audio data. He then said that combining this diary would significantly strengthen our case and provide grounds for claiming a large amount of compensation. Additionally, we might be able to secure child support. I then sent copies of the audio data and the diary's contents to Natalie's company. I addressed it to the supervisor who had come to the funeral and cried, asking for an internal investigation. The supervisor immediately took action. He reviewed the audio data and the diary and shared them with the executives. The executives learned that Colton had used his authority in the HR department to corner his wife, Natalie, who was also an excellent employee. The executives were furious and summoned Colton. The investigation proceeded by verifying the facts and interviewing other employees, leading to Colton's dismissal. Considering his actions, it was a deserved consequence. Later, I happened to run into him on the street, but he was unrecognizable. His beard was unkempt, and his once high-quality suit was wrinkled.
Ariana! Because of you, my life has fallen apart!
He exclaimed. I frowned, wondering what he was talking about. After all, I had lost my precious daughter. Upon hearing the details, it seemed that his mistress, Delilah, had dumped him shortly after he was forced to resign.
Even someone like me, you'll stay with me, right?
Colton had asked, to which Delilah coldly replied.
Ha! I can't be with an unemployed old man.
They had been living together, but that ended too, and now he was living alone in a shabby apartment.
You've drained me of compensation and child support. It's been terrible.
he complained, grumbling that his savings were nearly depleted due to keeping up with the president's daughter's spending habits. I felt more anger than sadness. I wanted to chase after him and slap his face. However, the fact that he didn't ask about the grandchildren showed that he no longer had any love for his family. Realizing that nothing would affect him, I gave up. It was much happier to focus on raising the 3 grandchildren than to hate him. After Colton resigned, several company executives visited our home. They came to apologize for Natalie. They regretted not being able to grasp her situation and driving her to death. They asked me to accept a large amount of compensation prepared by the company. I was surprised by the sudden offer but decided to accept it. However, even with that, Natalie would not come back. There would be no more laughing together with her. I thought about this while watering the sunflowers in the garden. The large flowers were standing tall and blooming beautifully. Thanks to the compensation, child support, and Natalie's savings, I could raise the grandchildren without any inconvenience. Elena started going to cram school in preparation for her high school entrance exams. Lillian and Lydia began reading mystery novels and watching dramas, and they seemed to be enjoying their days. Still, sometimes I saw them looking as if they were searching for their mother, and it made my heart ache. Losing my daughter and the grandchildren losing their mother was equally sad. I wanted us to slowly heal from this sadness and loneliness and be able to laugh from the heart together. I hoped we could live like those sunflowers, standing tall and looking up.
How did you like this story? Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.
Beth, thank you for taking care of my daughter for the past month. I'll come to pick her up tomorrow.
What are you talking about? While Kathy, my sister-in-law who had been traveling for a whole month, was still at the airport, I could hear the announcements in the background on the other end of the phone. Unlike my calm response, she started to panic.
Huh? No way! What are you talking about? She's there with you, right? I left Emily in your apartment's parking lot.
Emily is her daughter, which means she's my niece. I haven't seen her. When did this supposedly happen?
Don't play dumb. I sent you a message, so you must know.
I didn't receive any messages.
No, no way. That's impossible.
Kathy, now in a panic, let out a high-pitched scream over the phone.
What are you going to do about this? I left Emily with you. You have to take responsibility if something happens.
After that, Kathy hung up and tried calling Emily's child's smartphone but couldn't get through, making her even more frantic. She called me back in a rush, shouting even more, so I suggested she go back home first.
You know what? You're right. That's a good idea.
She hung up and hurried back home, but what she found there was Steve, Emily, and me. Kathy mouthed wordlessly, seemingly wanting to ask why the 3 of us were together.
Kathy, I've heard everything from these 2.
What?
Hearing Steve's words, Kathy was taken aback and turned pale. My name is Beth. Until a few years ago, I worked in an office. At the age of 40, I decided to go independent and started working as a freelance illustrator. With my income increasing, I now live alone in an apartment. My work is mostly done from home, and I only go out occasionally for groceries or meetings with clients. I'm not married and don't have a boyfriend, but I'm still satisfied with my life. Friends sometimes ask if I get lonely, but I've never thought about it that way. I'm more fulfilled by my work, so I don't plan to look for a partner in the future. I do worry a little about my old age, but I think I'll deal with that when the time comes. In that sense, I sometimes surprise myself by how optimistic I am. Today, after finishing the deadline for one illustration, I took a short break at 3 p.m. and looked at the calendar. Then I suddenly realized that my brother's birthday was just around the corner. My brother, Steve, who is 5 years older than me, works as a salesman for a major publishing company and often goes on long business trips. As a result, he sometimes brings me souvenirs from his trips. Last month, he casually stopped by my place with some souvenir cookies, so I invited him in and made coffee, and we ate together. You don't need to bring me anything. You should buy more for Kathy and Emily.
But I have to come to see you sometimes, too. I don't want you to collapse or something.
Whether it's overprotective or just caring, that has always been one of my brother's good traits. Kathy and Emily are Steve's wife and daughter, respectively, making them my sister-in-law and niece. Although I never tell Steve, I find Kathy a bit hard to deal with. She's very cheerful, always stylish with her nails and trendy fashion, and gives off a very glamorous impression. There's nothing wrong with that, and I don't mind it much, but she always seems to look down on me for being single. Even during a family gathering at Christmas, when she found out I didn't have a partner or even a boyfriend, she laughed out loud.
Hey, do you think you're so young and beautiful that you can put off marriage? Do you even know what a marriageable age is?
I believe marriage and relationships are personal choices. I don't think everyone needs to have a partner. When I responded like that, Kathy laughed out loud again. I don't know if it was the alcohol or what, but she kept teasing me about the same thing, and I got tired of dealing with it. One of my conditions for choosing an apartment was to find a place far from my brother's house, as I was fed up with her. However, I got along well with my niece, Emily. Emily, who is turning 10 this year, apparently goes to school with a cute light blue backpack. I haven't seen it myself, but she told me about it when she visited my home once.
Beth, you're so good at drawing.
Emily, watching me work on my illustrations, was thrilled as she looked at the drawings on my computer screen.
I wish I could draw too.
Oh, do you want to try?
Can I?
Yes. I still have plenty of time before the deadline, so you can try a little. Emily sat in front of the computer and eagerly started drawing. What she drew on the screen was her light blue backpack. She also mentioned that it was heavy because she had to carry a tablet as well. In the summer, she had to carry a water bottle, making it even heavier. I was really impressed by how hardworking Emily was despite being so small. According to Emily, Kathy lives as a housewife, and when Steve is away on business trips, she spends her time as she pleases. For dinner and lunch on school holidays, they buy and eat meals from grocery stores or supermarkets.
I always do the laundry, and sometimes Mom does it.
Really?
Yes. And on days when we have PE, she gets really angry if there's any mud on my shoes.
Why? What does your mom do at home?
She's always on her smartphone or watching TV.
To avoid upsetting her mother, Emily stays in her room or goes to the park or library. Hearing this, I feel concerned about Kathy as a parent, but I hesitate to interfere as an outsider. There was another time when we had a family gathering, and I saw Kathy harshly scolding Emily, who is usually quiet. I think she spilled some tea, but it was something that could have been easily wiped up with a cloth, and I thought it was unnecessary to get so angry.
Mom is scary. She gets mad no matter what I say, so I can't say anything.
Her words as she left that day, when she had drawn the light blue backpack for me, stuck in my mind like a splinter. I remembered that it was a sunny weekend day when Kathy left Emily with me, saying she was going on a day trip with her friends. I never imagined that a few days later, I would receive a similar message on my smartphone. It was around the time when the leaves in the nearby park had fully turned red, and the cold made me long for the sunlight. As I was returning to my apartment after running some errands, I saw a small figure standing alone next to the parking lot. She was wearing a light blue backpack and had a mask covering half her face, but I recognized her immediately. "Emily?" When I called out, her anxious eyes looked at me. It was indeed Emily. "What are you doing here alone? And with all that luggage?" A small carry-on suitcase was sitting beside her, making it look like she had run away from home.
Mom told me to go to your house."
Seeing the question marks forming above my head, Emily pointed to my bag and said, "On your phone." Maybe there was a message on my smartphone. I hurriedly took out my phone from my bag, and sure enough, there was a message from Kathy.
Beth, sorry for the sudden notice. I'm going on a month-long trip with a friend, so please take care of my daughter.
Reading this, a bewildered "huh" escaped my lips, but I quickly closed my mouth. Of course, I was confused, but I decided to bring the equally confused Emily into my apartment first. Once inside, Emily took off her mask, revealing cheeks as red as apples and very cold hands. I prepared some hot cocoa to warm her up and offered some snacks while listening to her story. She had been spending time in her room drawing in her notebook when Kathy suddenly entered without knocking, handed her a carry-on suitcase, and said,
"Emily, get ready to go to Beth's house. I'm not going to be home for a month, so take your backpack too. Got it?"
Okay.
Emily hurriedly packed her notebook, pencil case, textbooks, tablet, and other things into her backpack. Meanwhile, Kathy was on the phone with someone, sounding very excited.
"Really? That's great. Hey, wait a minute, you're already drinking? That's too early."
Her cheerful voice echoed through the house, sounding very different from her usual self. Emily covered her ears as she heard her mother's laughter from downstairs. After the call ended, Kathy returned to her usual voice, put Emily and her luggage into the car, and left her at that place. When Emily got out of the car, Kathy said,
"I'm leaving you with Beth for a month, so be good,"
and told her to wait there. Emily had been waiting for me under the cold sky. Thinking about how she could catch a cold, I felt a surge of anger. But does my brother, I mean, your father, know about this?
I don't think so. Mom doesn't seem to communicate with Dad much,"
she said while munching on chocolate cookies. Seeing crumbs on her cheeks, I thought it was cute, but also felt it was wrong not to inform my brother about the situation, so I decided to call him later.
"Beth, I don't want to stay with Mom anymore,"
Emily suddenly said while staring at the edge of her juice cup. She had a troubled expression that was unusual for a 10-year-old girl, who had been happily eating cookies just moments ago. "Why?"
"Because Mom gets angry easily, throws trash cans at me, and I hate it.
She throws trash cans?
Even when I haven't done anything wrong. She tells me to get out of the way and throws things at me. The teachers at school don't believe me when I tell them, and I hate it."
Large tears started falling from her eyes. She continued crying uncontrollably, and I spent the time soothing her and offering tissues until she calmed down. It was clear that what was happening to her was not normal. I decided to call Steve and see if he could come back. I stepped away and operated my smartphone out of Emily's sight, planning how to explain the situation to my brother. An idea came to me. All right, this should work. I whispered and called my brother.
What? Emily is. Yeah. What's going on?
He sounded quite shaken, his voice trembling slightly as he listened to my explanation. At first, he tried to dismiss it as a joke, but he eventually believed me and listened to the whole story. When I shared my plan, Steve agreed and said he would help by adjusting his work schedule and taking time off. Okay, please. I'll take care of Emily. I hung up the phone, deleted the message from Kathy, and returned to the living room, wondering if Emily had calmed down. I decided to treat her to something nice for dinner tonight, thinking about what to make as I took one step at a time back to her. Although Emily's school is a bit far from here, I explained the situation to the school, and they arranged for her to take the bus. This should make it easier for her to carry her heavy backpack with the tablet. I planned to bill Steve later for the bus pass, and I continued working from home as usual during the day. Emily wasn't enrolled in any after-school activities or programs, so she would come home after school and do her homework.
Beth, can you check my homework?
I was surprised, thinking that the teacher would normally do that, but Emily explained it wasn't the case.
My classmates all have their moms check it. I did mine by myself.
Realizing just how self-centered Kathy was, I picked up the red pen. After finishing grading her worksheets, it was time to prepare dinner. Whenever I went into the kitchen, Emily would follow me, eagerly indicating with her eyes that she wanted to help. Tonight we're making meatloaf. Could you start by peeling the onions?
Sure.
Emily quickly peeled the onions and followed my cooking instructions efficiently. I wondered where she had learned to cook but didn't have time to ask as we quickly finished making the meal. As these daily routines continued happily, a month passed in no time. Anticipating it was about time, I looked at the calendar, and sure enough, my smartphone rang with a call from Kathy.
Beth, thank you for taking care of my daughter for this past month. I'll pick her up tomorrow.
What are you talking about? I replied calmly. Having been on vacation for a month, Kathy was still at the airport, as I could hear announcements in the background.
What do you mean? I left Emily at your apartment, so you must know where she is.
I haven't seen her. When did you supposedly leave her here?
Don't play dumb. I sent you a message, so you can't say you don't know.
I didn't receive any messages. Are you sure you didn't leave her with someone else?
That's impossible. I know I left her with you.
Kathy, clearly panicking, started screaming on the phone.
How could you do this? I left Emily with you. You better take responsibility if anything happens to her. I'm calling Emily now.
She angrily hung up after shrieking and then called back again, still yelling. She had tried calling Emily's child phone but couldn't reach her, causing her to panic even more. Kathy, maybe you should go home and calm down.
You're right. That's a good idea. I'm going home.
As she was about to hang up, I overheard her arguing with another person, seemingly a man, but I couldn't make out the details. The room fell silent again, like the calm before a storm. Eventually, when Kathy returned home, she rushed down the hallway with loud, heavy footsteps. As she opened the door and entered the living room, her face, previously contorted in fury with hair disheveled like a demon, suddenly turned pale upon seeing Steve, Emily, and myself gathered there. Kathy seemed to want to say something, her mouth opening and closing in shock, but no words came out. Steve spoke up.
Kathy, I heard everything from these two. Also, the phone call earlier.
What?
Kathy replied. I put the phone on speaker so everyone could hear. It seemed easier for the conversation we need to have. By the way, Emily's smartphone was turned off, so it was natural she couldn't be reached.
What were you thinking, doing something like that?
Kathy exclaimed. The irony is rich coming from you. I said I didn't know earlier, but Emily has been staying with me for a month. Suddenly going on a trip and leaving a child unattended in front of someone else's house. What were you thinking?
I left a message though.
That's not the issue. Steve then spoke calmly, choosing his words carefully.
Both of you, calm down. Kathy, it's true you went on a trip leaving Emily behind. Your appearance and luggage suggest you just got back.
Kathy was wrapped in a warm coat, dressed neatly as if for going out. Her suitcase was bursting with items, likely souvenirs and clothes she had bought.
It's true I went on a trip, but I'm a housewife too, you know? I needed a break. Doing laundry and cooking every day, it's repetitive and stressful. Can't you understand? Let me go out with my friends.
Are these friends the same ones in these emails? I handed over several printed sheets. They contained email exchanges between Kathy and what appeared to be her affair partner, discussing plans like trips and outings, not just recently but since early last spring. On the day I took care of Emily, Kathy had gone cherry blossom viewing with this person. Her day trip with her friends was a blatant lie. Kathy covered her mouth as if to say oops. Actually, a few hours before Kathy arrived, I had checked the computer she uses, at Emily's request, and found this evidence in her email inbox. Emily had noticed her mother frequently staring at her smartphone, exchanging messages. But at some point, she began suspecting the other person might not be her father. Her suspicion turned into certainty when she saw a message on her mom's phone while she was asleep in the living room. It was from a man whose name she didn't know. She had heard the occasional voice on the phone, but it wasn't her father's. I had heard about her mother's affair half a year ago. Until a month ago, I had been half skeptical when Kathy suddenly said she was going on a trip, but after checking the computer just now, I realized Emily's intuition was correct. Looking at Steve, he was quietly but visibly shaking his shoulders.
What have you done? I trusted you. You left Emily with Beth, claiming you went on a vacation.
With clenched fists trembling, Steve confronted Kathy.
No! You are misunderstanding! I was forced to go on that trip because of him!
Forced? Is that why you left this house for a month? Come up with a better excuse.
I was being threatened. Believe me. Emily, you believe me, don't you?
Suddenly put on the spot, Emily responded calmly and steadily.
Mom, you were on the phone before you left, and you seemed really happy. Plus, you made me do all the cooking and cleaning, while you just laze around and sleep.
Emily glared at Kathy, her lips pursed in defiance.
You told me to go to bed early, but you went out late at night and came back in the morning, then slept on the floor. You were being totally hypocritical.
Steve, hearing this, pressed further.
Going out at night? Does that mean you were out partying?
No way! Emily, stop talking!
I quickly showed Steve a photo on my smartphone. It was a picture of Kathy, dressed flamboyantly, leaving late at night. This was taken a few months ago. Emily contacted me, and I happened to be nearby and took this photo. I was shocked too. Where were you going at that hour, Kathy?
Oh no.
Seeing the photo, Kathy realized she couldn't talk her way out of this and collapsed to the floor.
I can't believe this. I can't leave Emily with you anymore. Let's get divorced. I'll demand alimony. From now on, you can enjoy your life with that other guy.
Steve turned his back on Kathy, his shoulders slumped.
Why? Divorce? You can't be serious. Don't you think it's pitiful for Emily not to have a mother? What about Emily? Hey, help me, Emily.
No. Absolutely not. I'd rather have Beth than a mom like you.
It felt embarrassing to see her begging her own child. While I took care of Emily, I tried to spend as much time with her as possible, talking about school, hobbies, and her future. Of course, cooking together was one of those things. Don't worry, Kathy. I'll make Emily happy. With a smile, I said, and Kathy slumped, saying nothing more. Half a year later, their divorce was finalized, and Steve gained custody. Kathy, dragged by her parents, returned to her hometown. By the way, the man she had an affair with online disappeared as soon as he found out about Kathy's divorce, and they couldn't communicate anymore. When she realized she had been played, it was too late. All that remained for Kathy was paying a hefty settlement and child support. Her savings alone weren't enough, so she had to rely on her parents for more than half of it. However, this led to stricter monitoring by her parents, and she couldn't go out late at night anymore. Moreover, rumors spread throughout the neighborhood that she had divorced without taking her own daughter, so she rarely went out of the house during the day. Still, she couldn't avoid working forever, so someday she would have to re-enter society, but neither Steve, Emily, nor I knew what would happen after that. Steve decided to rent out their old house and move to another floor in the apartment where I live now. He plans to use the rent for mortgage repayments and savings for Emily. I started visiting them almost every day. Steve couldn't be near Emily due to frequent business trips and neglecting his family. He reflected on concentrating too much on work and decided to change jobs. It must have been tough to switch careers in his 40s, but his sales performance was outstanding, and his communication skills were high. It wasn't surprising he received job offers from 2 or 3 companies and started working at one of them. I didn't know Steve's abilities that well, and I was surprised, but he had always preferred field sales at his previous company and gently declined promotion talks.
I didn't find it interesting to stay on the same floor of the same company all the time.
For that reason? But the new job is fully remote, right?
That's right, but I think it's interesting to talk to various people. And above all, being with Emily is the best.
Emily still carries a light blue backpack and goes to school. Moving changed her school district, and Emily had to transfer schools. She must have been sad to say goodbye to her close friends and teachers, but surprisingly, she seemed calm and even enjoyed her new school life. Emily, are you used to your new school? While cooking dinner together, I asked, and Emily chuckled softly.
Yeah. I made a friend in the next class.
Already? That was fast. Emily nodded shyly.
Yeah, I'm going to her house next time to make meatloaf.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
Seeing her smile brightly like a flower in bloom, I couldn't help but smile too. Her dream for the future is to open a restaurant. Even though she's only 10, I think it's great that she already has such a solid dream. Emily told me the reason.
That friend is like me, her mom doesn't cook for her, so she cooks herself. That's why she said she wants to cook for people who don't have someone like us to cook for them.
I see.
I want to be like that too. So we're practicing making meatloaf.
Her innocent smile briefly stirred my heart, leaving me with indescribable feelings, but I quickly put on a smile and said, "That's great. Emily's meatloaf will be delicious. I hope many people get to taste it."
Hee hee.
Right now, looking ahead, Emily seemed brave and shining brightly. Her dream won't end as just a fantasy or a delusion. I'm looking forward to the day when Emily grows up and opens her own restaurant. How did you like this story? Please subscribe to the channel too. Well then, let's meet again in the next video.